Good morning. Today you're going to learn about absolute value and how to solve absolute value equation. The symbol for absolute value are two bars right next to each other, and the absolute value means the distance from zero. So if you have a number line and you notice you have a positive 2 and negative 2, the distance between negative 2 and 0, how many spaces, is 2. And if I look at the positive 2, the distance from positive 2 to 0 is 2 as well. So, so for example, if I'm looking for some number x that has a distance 4, so this my distance is 4, what two possibilities I have? One possibility is that my number is either negative 4, or my other possibility is that my number is positive 4. So this is what we find the distance that's 4 is my x is equal to positive or negative 4, because I have two choices. One is a negative 4, and the other one is a positive 4. So the next example is 15. If I'm asking myself what numbers have a distance that's 15, we can say x can be a positive 15 or x can be a negative 15, because the distance for both, it's going to be 15. Can I ever have a negative distance? So never negative distance. So this would be no solution, because you can never have a negative distance. And if I'm looking at a number line, how many zeros do you have? 0. So 0 to 0 is 0. So if I'm looking for the distance of 0, my only possibility is when x is equal to 0. So the next thing I'm going to go over how to find the absolute value, how to solve the absolute value equations, the steps. So the first step is we always want to isolate the absolute value. The absolute value is the two brackets. So isolate absolute value. You want the absolute value by itself. So you want to get brackets by itself on one side. And you will accomplish that by undoing orders of operation. So pretend you are solving for variable by performing opposite operations. So we have been doing that before. You're going to have a positive versus negative, multiplication versus division, and so forth. The second thing is, once you get the absolute value by itself, if absolute value is equal to negatives, then you have no solution. And if you have absolute value, some positive number, you open the gates. And what I say when you open the gates, if you pretend that this is the castle, once your castle is by itself, you're going to open the gates and you're going to write two equations. And first equation is going to be positive the second equation is going to be negative. Okay, so I'll show you in a moment how that looks. So for example, if you look at the next example, to A, I have an absolute value of x is equal to 7. So my castle is by itself. So that means I can open the gates. And when you open the gates, the first equation is going to be positive, and the second equation is going to be negative. Two solutions. Okay, in B, notice that I do not have my castle by itself, so I want this, my gates to be by itself. In order to get them by itself, I will need to divide by 2. So if I divide by 2, I have an absolute value of y is equal to 7. Now I notice I have my gates by itself, and so I will open the gates. The first one is a positive, the second one is a negative. If we look at the next example, notice that my castle is not by itself. I need to get rid of the positive 5. I need to move it to the other side, and you complete that by subtracting 5 from both sides. So this would allow me to have an absolute value. These two cancel, equals to 3. And now I'm going to lower the gates. So the first one is going to be positive 3, and the second one is going to be negative 3. In D, notice we have to perform a couple operations. So this is not by itself. So the first thing is I need to get rid of the negative 1, not the 3. So you always get rid of the number that's away. So in this case, here's my wall. I'm going to add 1 to both sides because I need to do the opposite. So 3 absolute value of x is equal to 6. Now I need to get rid of the 3, and this is multiplication between the wall and the absolute value. So opposite of multiplication you have learned is dividing. So that means you're going to divide both sides by 3. You get 2. My doors, my castle is by itself. Doors open, and I have a positive and negative 2 as my two solutions. Okay. Let's go down to next example. Notice that in the next example, I have absolute value by itself, and I have some stuff happening inside the walls. That's okay. My goal is to isolate the absolute value. So since I don't have anything else outside or on the side of the absolute value, now I'm going to lower the gates. And remember, my rule still is the same. One is the positive, one is going to be the negative. I keep everything that's inside the castle intact. You can never take anything out. That stays all together. So you're going to write x minus 16 equals positive 14, and x minus 16 equals to negative 14. Okay, positive and negative again. So now I do everything again the same to solve for x. In this case, I'm going to add 16 to both sides. So x is equal to positive 30. And here I add 16 to both sides, but I already have a negative 16. So in this case, x is equal to positive 2. Again, f, notice that my absolute value is already by itself. So if my absolute value is by itself, that means I can lower the gates on my castle. So the first one is going to be positive. So it's going to be 2x plus 4 equals to positive 16. And the second one is going to be 2x plus 4 equals to negative 16. So you have two separate equations. You have to write them as such, and we're going to solve each one. So in this example, first we need to subtract 4 from both sides. And you have 2x equals 2. These cancel. So 16 minus 4 is positive 12. Dividing by 2, my first solution is x is equal to positive 6. And now I need to solve the second equation. So I do the same thing, subtract 4 from both sides. So 2x is equal to positive negative 4 cancels. This is negative 20. And now I divide by 2. So x is equal to negative 10. Okay, let's look at G. So in G, you should notice that my castle is not alone on both sides. So I need to first get rid of this 3. And the way you get rid of the 3, this is multiplication. Opposite is division. So now I'm going to have my castle still intact. 2x minus 2 equals to 6. Now that I do not have anything around my gates, now I can lower the gates. And so the first one is 2x minus 2 equals positive 6. And the second one is 2x minus 2 equals negative 6. And now we're going to solve just like we have been solving all along. So we're going to add 2 to both sides. So 2x is equal to positive 8. And now we're going to divide by 2. So x is equal to 4. The same thing we're going to do on the other one. You're going to add 2 to both sides because opposite of minus 2 is positive 2. So you have 2x is equal to negative 4. And dividing by 2 both sides, my answer is negative 2. So I have 2 answers, which is 4 and negative 2. Example H. Notice again, I do not have my absolute value by itself, so I have to do some work here first. So the first thing, I need to get rid of the numbers that are away from my cancel. So that makes, I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So 2 absolute value 6x plus 5 equals to 26. Notice my castle, my gates are still not by itself. I still have things around, so I need to get rid of the 2. This is multiplication, so opposite is going to be division. So I have 6x plus 5 equals to 13. And so now I'm going to break down the wall. So 1 is going to be positive and 1 is going to be negative. So you're going to have 6x plus 5 equals to 13. And 6x plus 5 equals to negative 13. So minus 5 minus 5, 6x equals to 13 minus 5 is positive 8. And so now I'm going to divide by 6. Notice that I cannot divide 8 by 6, but I have to simplify. So 8 and 6 can be divided both by 2. So my final answer is 4 over 3. Fractions are okay. Don't panic when you get them. You just need to know that you have to reduce them. Let's solve the other one. So minus 5 on both sides. So here I have 6x equals to negative 18. And in this case, when I divide by 6, I get negative 3. So in this case, I have one answer is positive, one answer is negative. I have a fraction, which is a valid answer. Okay, so our ultimate goal is to always isolate the brackets, isolate the absolute value. You accomplish that by doing opposite operations. Once the absolute value is by itself, you lower the gates. One equation is going to be positive, one equation is going to be negative, and then you solve each one. Okay, let's look at the back. So we are going to have to solve the equation, and we want to determine if there is one, two, or many, or no solutions. So one solution, two solutions, many solutions, or no solution. So let's see what that looks like. So here's our first example. We have the absolute value. So here are my brackets. And it's equal to negative 4. And we already learned that we cannot have negative distance. So no negative distance. And so hopefully you can see that this would be no solution. So none, you would circle none. Okay, B, notice that my castle already has the absolute values by itself. I can lower the gates. And in this case, x is equal to positive 3, x is equal to negative 3, 2 solutions. So I circle my 2 and write 2 solutions. Okay, in C, notice that I do not have my absolute value by itself, so I need to do some work first. I'm going to add 20 to both sides. So absolute value is equal to 20 minus 14 positive 6. And now that my absolute value is by itself, I can lower the gates. B is equal to positive 6, B is equal to negative 6, and this is 2 solutions. Circle 2. Okay, C. Notice that my absolute value is not by itself, so first I have to get it by itself. So I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. I have an absolute value is equal to negative 2. No absolute value can be negative, so no solution. So this would be none. Okay, let's see if we can work on some multiplication and division. So notice, and in this case, I do not have an absolute value by itself. I have a number in front, and I know that this is going to be multiplication between negative 8 and absolute value. Opposite of multiplication is a division. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 8, and you get that absolute value b is equal to negative 2. This is no solution because we cannot have negative distance, so my answer is none. The second example, F, notice that I have a negative number in front, but that's okay because this is multiplication. Opposite of multiplication is division. Notice in this case, when I'm dividing by negative, I already have 8 that's negative, so I need to pay attention. The negative divided by negative is positive. So now I get a positive 4, and when I open the gates, I have y is positive 4, y is negative 4, and in this example, you have 2 solutions. Okay, let's see what's happening in the next one in G. Notice the absolute value is not by itself, so I am going to first isolate the absolute value. And once I do that, I have answer negative 3. Remember that what I said earlier, if you have a castle, whatever is inside the castle is protected. Cannot leave the castle until you open the gates. So in this case, I have an absolute value that's equal to negative number, so that is no solution. So none. In the next example, we are going to isolate my castle. So whatever is inside has to stay inside until you get the castle by itself. So I'm going to add 4 first. So you have x plus 3 equals to 3, because negative 1 and positive 4 is 3. Now that I have my absolute value, castle doors by itself, I can open my gates. And you're going to have x plus 3 is 3, and x plus 3 is negative 3. So minus 3 on both sides, and you get x is equal to 0, and x is equal to negative 6. 0 is a number, so in this case, you have 2 solutions. 2, circle 2. Okay. Let's work a couple more. So next example first. I don't have the absolute value by itself. I have multiplication, and I know opposite of multiplication is division. Divide both sides by negative, so now I have 10 minus 2z equals to negative 4. I don't have to do anything further because I cannot have negative, so no solution. This is 9. Okay, next one. We want the absolute value by itself, opposite of multiplication. It's going to be division. So I divide both sides by negative 4. Remember, everything that's inside is protected and stays inside until you lower the gates. So now I have absolute value of 2x plus 5 equals negative divided by negative is positive. So now I have a positive 4. I open the gates and I have 2x plus 5 is positive 4 and 2x plus 5 is negative 4. We have two solutions. So minus 5 on both sides, 2x equals negative 1. Divided by 2, x is negative 1/2. It's a fraction, it's okay. And now we're going to do the second one, minus 5. You get 2x equals negative 9 divided by 2. X is negative 9 over 2. And you can't reduce it, you will just leave it. And so this has two solutions. So fractions are okay, just leave them alone. Okay, let's do the next example. We want to have the absolute value by itself. Remember, anything that's inside, it's protected until I lower the gates. First, you need to get rid of the numbers that are away. So in this case, I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So I have 2m minus 5 equals 0. Okay, 2 minus 2 is 0. So now, if I notice that I still don't have my castle by itself, I can't lower the gates. I have a number in front. This is multiplication. Opposite of multiplication is division. And 0 divided by any number is what? You can put it in a calculator. If you put 0 divided by 2 in a calculator, you will get a big fat 0. And so in this case, when I open the gates, can you have a negative 0? You can't. So you will just have one equation, which is m minus 5 equals 0. So you're going to add 5 to both sides, and m is equal to 5. So in this case, it would be one solution. Next example, we have an absolute value in front. We have a negative 1/3, and this is multiplication. So opposite of 1/3 is, how do I get rid of the fraction? You multiply by the denominator. So both sides we will multiply, and I'm going to put in parentheses, by negative 3 over 1. You multiply by reciprocal, 3 over 1. You might want to put this 2 over 1 so they balance out. So this positive 3, negative 3, and negative 3, they just cancel because this is multiplication. So now, and this cancels, so you only have the absolute value of 1 minus 8x equals, and notice here, I have 2 times negative 3, which is negative 6. And that means I can stop right away because you cannot have a negative solution. So this would be no solution because absolute value distance can never be negative. So this would be none. Okay? So hopefully you got today's lesson. So your homework is coming next. Please watch this video again if you are having trouble and you do not understand something.